Good afternoon and welcome to Rockfeed. We are very fortunate to have an awesome guest today, and this is John Cooper, the vocalist of Skillet. They are a tremendously successful band, and they are releasing Victorious: The Aftermath. It's coming out today. You'll be seeing this on Friday. And it's out everywhere. This is a deluxe edition of their highly successful album, Victorious, which is one of my favorite albums that came out of the last several years. Highly recommend it. I'm also a big pro wrestling fan, and this song, one of their songs is the theme song for Monday Night Raw, which I'm also very, very keen on. So, John, you guys obviously have this tremendous deluxe edition of your album that is coming out today. And again, one of my favorite rock albums of the last few years. You know, what went into making these sort of reimagined versions of the songs that you guys put out?
Well, thank you very much. That's my favorite introduction I've ever had, ever, in my whole career.
That's awesome.
Yeah, no, I mean, a couple things, when people make albums, you typically, of course, have extra songs that they might go on the record, they might not. And then sometimes if they're not going to go on the record, you don't finish them. So we had a few songs left over that, frankly, I was really bummed didn't make the record. And so when we got here, when, the tour got canceled and the pandemic and lockdown, I'm like, dude, why don't we finish those songs? Because I really wanted them to go on the album anyway, or I could release a single at the end of the lockdown, which I think is going to only last 8 weeks. Wrong. So it was kind of like, well, we'll record those songs. And then something else organic happened. This is actually kind of cool, which is that we were receiving all of these messages, probably as all the bands were, about people were depressed. I mean, they were being locked for 8 weeks, 9 weeks, 10 weeks. People were really getting depressed.
Yep.
And suffering with mental health and, all sorts of issues. And we decided to record a song on piano live just to put it up on Instagram and Facebook, just as a, hey, I hope you guys are doing okay. And we had this overwhelming fan response for what it was like to hear a song on piano. Because when you hear it without the guitars, you hear the lyrics more, you hear the melody more. And all of a sudden people were really connecting with it in a way that maybe they hadn't, because of the moment we were in. So we thought, why don't we record some piano songs and we will throw it all together into a great deluxe package where people get to hear the songs unplugged. And maybe it helps people. Maybe they like it, it's got more emotion to it. And it's just something special for the fans. So that is how the process happened.
Right. And so I've always been fascinated by your band because I've been aware of Skillet for quite some time, and I've always admired your success. And when I was younger, I was always like, I wasn't always the most religious person. And I was like, they're a Christian band. I don't really know what to make of them. And which is interesting, in the last couple of years, I've really gotten into your band. And I think a lot of people have this weird perception of you guys that's totally false, where it's you guys are going around pushing your views on people. You really can't even tell from listening to the band, which, by the way, I'm not dogging the message in your music. I think the message is fantastic too. And I also think that you guys are trendsetters, because if you look back to, maybe 10 plus years ago, all the music was angsty and there wasn't this element of inspiration. You guys have kind of always mostly been about that, empowering and everything. And now a lot of bands are doing that. And I'm like, you guys have been many, trendsetters in a lot of ways. And I'm curious if you've noticed that your band has had like this really cool resurgence, which, by the way, I use resurgence lightly because for those of you who aren't aware, you guys have sold, I believe, more than 10 million albums. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Well, 12.
But who's counting?
You asked 12 million.
Right. That is impressive. I mean, Skillet is a massive band.
Well, thank you very much. I do think that you hit on some interesting things there. And one of those things is that Skillet, in a lot of ways, in my view, was a bringing back something that I personally felt was really great about music in the 60s and the 70s, which was, there's a lot of spiritual music in the 70s. That doesn't mean religious. So you have the kind of sex, drugs, rock and roll element of the 80s.
Sure.
And, like party rock and party metal. And I felt that Skillet was singing about things that we believed in. And that reminded me personally more of some of the 60s revolutionary songs. They were writing songs about the moment they were living in, whether that's Johnny Cash, whether that's the Beatles and some of their later stuff. Then you get into the 70s with all the very spiritual Kansas or Fleetwood Mac, Styx. There was that great movement of like spiritual music. And I never even recognized the Skillet was that different, to be honest. I just wanted to write about things that mattered to me. But I think you also touched on something interesting, that a lot of people are unaware that Skillet was a Christian band, because not everything was overtly religious.
Right.
It just had a spiritual, feeling to it. It's a feeling of spirituality. I kind of like that, because I like that art can be taken. Maybe that's about a girl, or maybe that's about God. I think, why not write something like that? We have a song called Hero.
Right.
That was a big song for us. And so in interviews,
Massive.
People say, who's your hero? And I say, oh, I wrote that song about my hero, Jesus Christ. Jesus said something that is so cool, that said, there is no greater love than someone that lays his life down for his friends. That is an awesome message, whether you are an atheist or a religious person or a Buddhist person, or whether you're a police officer in 2020 or whatever it is that you do. That's a cool message. So I like that about Skillet's music. I do think that it is ironic that some of the things that maybe used to hurt us in rock music, being the positivity or being the fact that we have girls in our band. I remember people just like, you just can't have two girls in a metal band. It doesn't work. But now that's kind of quite in vogue. So I think Skillet was on the front end of the girl rocker thing, which I always thought was cool, because the girls in Skillet are amazing. And they hold up to any rocker on the planet. But also, I think that positive message that just because it rocks doesn't mean it has to make you angry. And I think that anger is a very viable emotion for rock music. But I also think that empowerment is a viable emotion, and Skillet tries to do both.
Yes, and you hit that nail on the head. And I've noticed this with other people that have tried to experiment with different sounds and things. Like Corey Taylor has a solo album coming out, and the reaction to it, there are some people that are very confused that it doesn't sound like Slipknot, and it's not angry and furious and everything. And I feel like people need to understand that rock music and metal music is not just about anger or aggression. You can do it in a way where it can be inspirational. Some of the best metal songs that I've always loved have been songs that actually inspire me. But then, of course, there are songs that you can listen to as an outlet as well. And so I've always found that interesting. So with Skillet, you guys have always been in rock. You've been immensely successful, but you haven't always been like sort of directly associated with typical rock bands. Do you feel like maybe there are industry hacks or people or whatever you want to call them that are like, oh, they're Christian, I'm against that? Because for me, again, I'm not the most religious person because I don't know the answers. And I have so many friends that are religious, and I love them dearly. And I think that's lame if that's something that people have done, in my opinion.
Well, let's see. Lots to unpack there. I mean, I've encountered a lot of people such as yourself that just are like, dude, I just want good music. I don't care what you believe or not, or what you do backstage or what have you. Most of everybody I've met has been really cool like that. It is true that we are not directly for instance, you say Corey Taylor. Corey is a friend of mine. Right. And in terms of Corey's music, I think we all know this by now. He can pull off anything he wants to. He's a genius. Yes. And he's a really good guy. He's just a cool guy. We hang out, have fun. Most everybody that I know is like that. They're just really cool. But I don't try to force someone to believe what I believe, and they don't do that to me. But I do think that for some reason there is a feeling sometimes, not from everybody, that maybe Skillet doesn't as much belong here. They're not necessarily on our team, even though we may play some of the music. And I don't hold that against anybody at all. I get it. In some ways, we are a little different. I do think that the music listeners, they couldn't give a crap. They just want,
Yes.
they want to hear some good music, and they don't really, if they relate to the song, then they think that's cool. In fact, there's a lot of bands that were not Christian bands who were called Christian bands because it felt like Christian music.
Right.
Be it Evanescence or Creed. Those are just off the top of my head. And I'm not speaking for those people personally, but they weren't what you would call a quote Christian band, but they sometimes got treated like it at first, not treated like it. They got associated with it because
Sure.
they spoke of positive things and spiritual things. And I think if you look at the success of Evanescence and Creed, you'll see that the music listener just doesn't care. And that is why at Skillet concerts, I see people with Slipknot t-shirts, Five Finger Death Punch. That's a weird one. I never thought that. I'm a big Five Finger Death Punch fan. Yeah. And I meet tons of fans with Five Finger shirts on at my concerts, and I always think it's cool and kind of funny.
Right.
But I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, no, it absolutely does, and I just find that to be such a interesting aspect, and also I don't think it certainly hasn't adversely impacted you. When you think about the the success that Skillet has had is you are absolutely one of the biggest hard rock bands that are out there. And that is not by accident. You, at this point, you guys have been in the game for what, north of 20 years now?
Yeah. 23 years.
Jeez.
Woo! And
What do
counting, baby?
You are the master of writing just fantastic hooks. What is that you, how do you approach that when you go into writing these songs with just these soaring choruses? I caught you guys in Germany or in Switzerland in December. I got to catch you guys live, and you put on a great show. And I was just taken back by the choruses that you guys have, just the hits on hits on hits that I'm listening to. And I'm like, oh my God, they've had so many hits.
Oh, that's so cool. Wow. Seeing Skillet in Germany or Switzerland, that's cool. Yeah, well, that's very kind. Thank you. I don't know. I usually just try to say something that I believe in. And I always find that if it's something that if that's authentic, I think that what's the word? Great art has to be authentic. And that is why,
Sure.
For me, I know some Christians don't like it when I say this, but that is why I can listen to somebody sing something that some Christians find very offensive. And I just go, man, that's really good art. Whether that's Trent Reznor or Rob Zombie or what have you, Slipknot, that's a great example.
Right.
I go, I believe that that's what Corey Taylor means when he sings that, and it makes me believe him. Yeah. To me, that is where the hook comes in. And sometimes it's in the way a certain artist says a certain thing. If you take the artist, if you divorce the two, and you give that same lyric and melody to another artist, it might not be a hit. Right. That's like a weird, all the stars aligning. In music, that's what they call it. All the stars have to align. It's got that certain factor. So I always find, for me, if it's something I believe, and if I can try to make it sound like something that someone else might want to sing at a gym if they're working out, or if they were on their deathbed, if they heard something that said, that's exactly how I feel, that's usually how I try to write a chorus. And that matters to me because I want to sing about things that I love, things that I feel, things that I believe.
Absolutely. And your music reflects that. The messaging that you're purveying is obviously, things that are important to you and important to a lot of people, including myself. And I find that those messages obviously have cultivated a very, very loyal fan base for you guys. And your success is obviously, it speaks for itself. And I was just curious though, even not so much lyrically though, but how, did you study music theory or anything? I remember I listened to a podcast. I'm a big fan of your podcast. It's called Cooper's Stuff, right? and I enjoy it. I love your candor on it, and you know, I just love that you keep it
Okay.
real. And you've talked about at one point that you write a lot of songs, like something like 60 or 70 songs. So, I mean, what do you just have, like a studio in your house and you're just cranking them out?
Well, that's very kind. I do write a lot. And when we release records, we always write at least 45, 50 songs. Usually it's more
Wow.
like 60 or 70. Yeah. And, you know, you're always looking for that magic song. And
Sure.
sometimes, in fact, our biggest record was called Awake, and it had our song Hero, Monster. But even when we had those songs written, truthfully, the label didn't think we had a radio song. So after I wrote Monster and Hero, I wrote another 30 songs. And I was finally like, we have to record. I think these songs are pretty good. And so it was a lot of work. But I just write as I go. And I find that I get really inspired by fans. I love talking to fans, and I hear these like crazy stories about what a song means to someone. And honestly, people wouldn't believe it. People wouldn't believe me if I told them what they were. Like we have a song called "It's Not Me, It's You," and about 5 years ago, I was on tour in Kansas City, and this guy comes up to me in a meet and greet. A man comes up to me, and he starts crying, and he says, "I got to tell you, I I was I was married. I had a kid. I was addicted to meth, addicted to alcohol, and my wife. We were fighting all the time. She took my kid and left. And he went. He said, "I heard your song called 'It's Not Me, It's You,' which, by the way, is probably one of the angriest songs I ever wrote. Okay, it was a really angry song. It was written about those relationships when somebody makes you think it's always your fault. But in reality, it's actually them. They're the one poisoning you." And he said, "I heard the song, 'It's Not Me, It's You.' And I realized if I was ever going to see my kid again, I had to get clean." And he said, "That song put me in rehab. And it's 4 years later. I've been clean and sober for 3 years. And I got my kid back. And it's all because of this song." And this guy was crying. I was thinking, from that song, that felt like an impossibility to me. So people like that inspire me to such a huge degree that I will respond to that. I need to write a song. I have songs that are written to other fans. And so it's those kind of stories that I'm on the road. I write. I do have a studio, and I carry around gear on the road. I'll record on the road or in a dressing room at a venue or a hotel or wherever we're at to get those ideas down. And then we try to pick from them later on. So it's not a fun process, but the writing part is fun. The writing part is fun, but choosing the songs, it sucks. It
Right.
sucks.
Now, are you a pro wrestling fan?
I am. I love wrestling ever since I was a kid.
That's awesome. So how does like a WWE deal come together? I imagine like they might have just licensed it through the label, or was it something cool like Triple H calling you and be like, "Hey."
Yeah, Triple H called me. He was like, that's yeah. I'm not doing any more songs unless Triple H calls me personally. That's how I roll. I roll
Yeah.
hard. With
There we
Skillet.
go.
Yeah, you know what's really funny? I have to give serious props to WWE because when we released the song Monster, 2009, at the time, we had a really, really hard time getting people to play the song. And for whatever reason it was, people just didn't want to play it. But I was like, this song is really, really good. I don't know why we couldn't be played it. And one of the very first people that supported it was WWE.
Wow.
And it didn't happen through anything like a phone call or a meeting. It happened because basically somebody that worked at WWE had a friend of a family member whose son loved the band. And they got the song up the chain. And at some point, somebody called and said, "Yeah, I'd never even heard of the band before, but my blah, 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 blah's kid turned me on to it. And we think this song would be perfect for Hell in a Cell. What do you think about that?" And I was like, of course I want it on WWE. So that is how it happened. It happened because some some probably like video game playing awesome kid out there. I probably owe that kid a lot of money because WWE came on it. And then, as you know, in your business, the story becomes if WWE plays it, then maybe you need to play it. That's what happened. And before you knew it, Monster was never a number one song at radio, but it's at 3 million singles sold. It's still sell. Spotify's like 1 million streams a week or something like that. Still 11 years later, so I owe a lot to
That's
WWE.
amazing.
And I will never say anything negative about WWE. I owe a lot, but I have been a fan ever since I was a kid. I'm from Memphis, so we had Mid-South Wrestling, and we had Randy the Macho Man was always through Memphis, and Jerry Lawler was from Memphis.
Right.
So, that was always a big thing with me.
And so, for those of you who don't know out there, I'm sure most of you do, that if you watch, I'm a big wrestling fan, but their theme is currently the Monday Night Raw theme. So it's reaching millions of people every week. And so, I mean, does that translate for you guys? Do you notice people that are like, oh, who's your favorite wrestler? I mean, is there like a crowd of WWE fans that come out to your shows now?
Well, definitely, especially when when I was talking about Monster, that same year in 2009, when WWE put out their video game, they included a couple of Skillet songs. And I still to this day, I meet fans that say, I heard of you guys on WWE video game in 2010,
Wow.
So, without a doubt, that still happens. So it definitely is a cross thing on our song, a cross fan base between rock and wrestling, rock and sports, rock and NASCAR. There's a lot of those it's the energy of rock music is really fun for sporting events. So our song Legendary, as you said, has been the theme song. And yeah, we have tons of people that just heard of the band from watching WWE and hearing the song Legendary come on. It's a perfect song for WWE. So I was just really excited that they wanted to use it. I was thrilled, actually.
Yeah, so I just thought that was so cool to see that WWE is one of the last mainstream entities. I don't know if you can see, but I've got some pro wrestlers behind me. I've got John Cena and the good old Hulkster there. And so I think WWE is one of the last true mainstream entities that really does support rock and metal. They've been fantastic to bands like Code Orange and just really, really great. So, you obviously are one of the most successful rock bands and musicians. The landscape, it's just an unwinnable situation. I presume you guys will be okay during this pandemic. I certainly hope so. But looking forward to you guys getting back out there. How do you think a band that's younger or smaller is able to become successful in the modern era right now?
Whoa. Honestly, I don't know. It is so difficult. Obviously, the whole world, every industry, service industry or concerts, sports, whatever. Obviously, the pandemic, well, gosh, I was about to say, obviously, at some point, the world will go back to normal, but is that even true? We just don't know.
Right.
I think that a lot of younger acts they probably have more of a knack for social media. They have more of a knack for playing virtual concerts and, learning how to give fans, specified content and unique content, learning to set up gear and all that. I mean, we do that as well, but I'm not going to lie to you. That is not my favorite thing in the world.
Sure.
My favorite thing in the world is old school. I don't even like using like in-ear monitors, I don't, because I can't hear the crowd. Because I was raised in a different generation, to me, it's all about live concerts. It's about having a fan sing into my microphone for a second, jumping in the crowd and hearing them sing, and without them being afraid they'll get COVID. It's just a very different thing. I do think young bands, unfortunately, are having to find other ways to do what I had to do as well, which is to maybe you have to work at McDonald's. I mean, when my first record came out with Skillet, I was married. It was not the let's just say this, it took a little ounce of humility to go play concerts for 3 days in a row and come back and go work at McDonald's for 3 days in a row, telling my friends, that were graduating college, like, no, I have a record album. I have an album that just came out. Why are you working at McDonald's? Because it's a really hard business.
Yep.
You have to be willing to do whatever it takes to get to that next level. And if you believe in your art and you are ready to just, come hell or high water, it's all about my art. You may have to take on those secondary and tertiary jobs to do it. But I do think that a lot of young bands are getting very good at viral videos and viral performances and virtual performances. And, I don't even really have any advice. It's also weird because rock and roll is not mainstream in any way anymore. You never hear guitar in pop music. You never hear, big live loud drums and screaming in rock music, even like you would have, 10 years ago. It was fringe, but 10 years ago you still had Nickelback songs crossing over to pop. You still had some of those elements, and those elements are gone. So I think everybody's wondering, what will that look like in the future? Will there be a new rock and roll that starts that crosses over to become popular again, or is it all different? No one knows.
Right. And I think there is some positive signs that are showing. Number one, I think one of the this was in the New York Times today. One of the major guitar companies this year is reporting they have sold the most guitars they've ever sold this year in 2020. So I find that interesting. Wow. I don't know if that's going to translate. So
it's interesting. And there's a new wave. I didn't know that, but I have noticed there's a new wave of girl rockers.
Right.
That don't have this same, what's the word? I don't want to say stigma. There certainly is not this stigma against girl rockers like there was 20 years ago.
Yes.
So the interesting thing is that there is a wave, I've noticed at my concerts, of chick rockers. Lots of girl guitar players, tons of girl drummers, and there might not be the same stigma. There certainly is not the same stigma against girls in rock music that there was, 20 years ago when Skillet first started. But a lot of these young girls don't have that stigma against metal and against rock in the way that a lot of the, more electronic, musicians were. There was, the last 8 years, there was that feeling of, we don't want guitar. It's just, that's too metal. That's too dated, or that's too X, Y, or Z. A lot of the girls don't have that. They're like, hey, I can do this too. And now you're seeing a lot of like shredder guitar girls, finger tapping and whammy diving and the whole thing. And I'm ready for that to come back. I'm ready for pinch harmonic squeals and whammy dives. Let's do it.
Yes. It is a fantastic thing to see, and we need all the people that we can that are coming in and playing music. So you've got this deluxe album coming out. You've got reimagined versions of your songs. And I thought it was so interesting to see the way that you take these songs that are normally very heavy, they're very aggressive, and you can scale them down and make them much more reserved. And I was curious, like, how you approach something like that, and are there members of your band that might be super possessive of like, but I want my solo, and I want this part in there.
Okay, I hope everybody's listening, because I'm about to drop some wisdom on you. This is how I do it. We go, hey, I wonder if it'd be really cool to have a piano version of so-and-so song. And then my wife goes, sure, I'll do it.
That's fantastic.
That's how you run a business, man. You got to have a wife that can produce anything in the world. But for reals, my wife, Corey, who is in the band, she plays guitar and keys for the band. She is an amazing producer, and she's an amazing piano player. And I will say this, there's a difference between a great keyboard programmer and a piano player.
Right.
And Corey
she plays multiple instruments.
Yes, that's right.
Wow.
And she's good at both. She can program and she can play. And so the reason this started was from playing those live, her playing the piano and me singing. We just did it live. We were like, well, why don't we try some of those things? And she's really good at it. And, I think Skillet songs, let me say this, Skillet songs are written unbeknownst to me. In other words, I didn't know that I was writing in very classical sense. Sometimes the melodies are very classical driven. Now I do play classical piano. My mom was. Here's a little bit of my story. I was raised in Memphis, Tennessee, the Bible Belt. There was nothing more sinful than rock and roll music when I was growing up.
Ooh.
Okay. I could not listen to anything with drums, nothing with guitars. We couldn't wear black. And I didn't grow up with rock music. My mom was a piano teacher and a voice teacher. So I began playing piano at about age 4. I sang my first solo at church at age 5. And so I grew up taking classical piano for 8 years. A lot of people don't know that I played the trombone.
Mm.
I was a marching band nerd, okay? And I did that all the way through college. So I had a scholarship to play in the symphony in college. So classical music is very much part of what I grew up with. So I'm sometimes unaware that I'm writing rock songs, sometimes more in the sense of classical melodies. So I think that when you hear them on piano, some people go, oh, wow, that's really pretty.
Right.
They're really pretty melodies. And I think it's part of what makes Skillet unique. So doing that on a piano, I guess, has been more effective than I ever would have thought it would be. Does that make sense? I didn't know it was going to work, but it really works. But Corey's really good at all that stuff.
I just find that so fascinating that you guys are like the Sonny and Cher of rock.
Yeah,
it's just really
right.
Cool. That's so neat. That's neat.
We
and
are,
so
yes.
and you guys are parents and you bring your kids on tour with you?
Yes, my kids have toured with Stone Sour and Hailstorm.
Wow.
And, I mean, you name it, my kids have toured with Nickelback, and there's a whole bunch of others. That Shinedown, of course, my great friends in Shinedown. How can I forget? Papa Roach. They've met Alice Cooper, and we play with Iron Maiden in Italy and what used to be Czechoslovakia. My kids have had this life. I don't know if they know how awesome their parents really are.
Literally.
But no, it's been really cool, you know. And I love it because it brings everybody we tour with says, man, having kids makes this a family dynamic. And I love that because, you know, we tour with a lot of bands that don't believe what we believe. And that never, ever matters to me. Doesn't matter to my kids. And thankfully, it hasn't mattered to the people I tour with. And so I remember when we toured with, I believe it was Shinedown and In This Moment, I believe it was, on Carnival of Madness. And I remember one time laughing before In This Moment was going to take the stage at catering, seeing my then 9-year-old daughter, you know, playing Barbies with Maria. I was like, if the rock and roll world saw what was happening backstage, they wouldn't believe it. And Maria is a good friend of ours and got to know my daughter. And I think those are really special moments because a lot of people don't know is when you're on the road, any band that you meet, there's a certain sort of fraternity that happens because you feel that you were all in this together, sort of, that we're all in the business of making music. And if music goes good for In This Moment, then that's going to benefit Skillet. If it goes good for Shinedown, that's going to benefit me. Everybody wants everybody to win. So there's a camaraderie that happens. And I think I just think that's a really cool thing. So my kids have had a really interesting life and they're very well adjusted. My kids can talk to anybody on the planet about religion, politics, movies, movie directors, anything you want to talk about, they probably would talk because they've grown up that way.
Yeah, and it's neat because, you know, they're probably much more socially well adjusted than I was because they're put in scenarios where I was this. I mean, this is how I got into this. I was just this dork on the computer all the time, and it worked out great for me. But, you know, I developed social skills over time, and I think that's a real asset to them, you know, to be able to have to travel the world and be able to see these things and experience different cultures and people that you don't always agree with, because we're in this place right now where the exchange of ideas as a concept is dead. There's no exchanging of ideas anymore. I hate you and you hate me and everybody's relatives are shitting on each other all the time and it's just a big mess. And it's good. That's just really cool. And I'll say, I'm not against religion at all. And I'm not, I wouldn't even say I'm a non-believer. I'm just maybe a skeptic. And what has been a skeptic for me from a faith perspective, and I will say, you and your band, having listened to you guys and listened to your message, have been more effective for me in listening and being interested in that than I've had bad experiences with the religious institutions, which
Right.
led me away from it. Like I tell this story. I went to church a few years ago and I'm like, I'm going to give this another shot. And I went to it and they're like, all right, guys, stick around. We've got a major announcement to make at the end. And I'm like, oh, this is going to be interesting. And I'm in the business of marketing. I know I study it. I follow it. I consult with people and, outside of YouTube, this is what I do. And so they're like, we got a big announcement. I'm like, oh, this is going to be interesting. And so at the end, they're like, and here it is, our brand new logo. And I'm like, oh no. And I was so bummed about it. I just didn't come back. But seeing people like you guys
right.
and
You're
your
ready for
positivity.
that's really nice to hear. I mean, what I think I agree with you. I think it's a great thing to talk to people not like you. And I'm very passionate about what I believe. I'm very opinionated.
Yeah.
But I never mind if people hate what I believe or even hate the way that I say it. It would never cause me to not want to hang out and have a drink with somebody or have a meal with somebody. It wouldn't cause me to do that. And partly for me, I'm like, this is America. We're supposed to enjoy the free exchange of ideas. So I like that. I do think it's a great thing my kids have been raised in because they also know never to judge a book by their cover, because some of the nicest people we meet, you see Corey Taylor on stage with Slipknot, and you meet him backstage, that seems like a different person.
Right. He's such a nice guy.
Yeah. People with tattoos, people that have different colored skin, people that whatever. And so I think that's a really good thing. And I do know that whatever story you just told me about your church experience, we've all either had that experience or we have heard that, a version of that. I just always remind people, hey, remember that whatever institution you go to, or whether it's a church or a political party or a PTA meeting for your kids, you're going to have bad stuff happen, because we got to remember the institutions are made up of people just as crappy as I am.
Right.
Just as rude as I am and just as dumb as I am. And having those gracious moments to go, we're all human. We all suck. Let's start over again.
Right. I agree with that. But I really do enjoy how you guys, you put your thoughts out there and you share it in a way where it's like, just think about this. I don't care if you don't have to believe it, but just consider this. And I read some of the things that you put out there and I'm like, well, that's an interesting thing I hadn't considered before. And I hadn't had that opportunity in the past. And like, that's why I watch your podcast, which that's why I was so excited to have you on. But, and I'll say this too, without getting, too personal on myself, but, someone really close to me is dealing with cancer right now. And it's been really tough. Some days I haven't been able to do the show. And, your music is one of the bands that has really helped me personally. And I don't normally share that kind of stuff, but, that's just a fact. And your message has been, I need an uplifting message right now. And it has been very helpful to me in this age of negativity and toxicity. You focus on the things that really matter, which is family and friends and people in the real world,
Wow.
So, thank you for that.
That's amazing. Thank you. What an incredible story. I love that.
Yeah.
My cancer's close to home for me as well. My mom died from cancer when I was 14, and
wow,
music did the same thing for me. And so whenever I tell people why I love music, to me, I go all the way back to when I was 14. My mom passed away, and I began listening to rock music, and it just made me feel good.
Right.
It's so simple. Music, some people say that we don't live, was it art doesn't keep us alive, but art is one of the things we live for. It
Right.
gives us hope. And I think that's what music does. So I'm really honored to know that. And I hope that music helps people watching, right? It's a volatile time. I think we're all ready for 2021.
Yes.
I think we're ready.
Yes.
We're just ready to move on to 2021, man.
Right. I'm just ready for the election to be over in general. I mean, just
Oh,
everybody
Lord.
mad at each other about everything. And I'm just like out here, I'm just ready for it to be over. It's just ridiculous.
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
I wanted to ask you, about your mom and dealing with that at such a young age. And for me, I'm 30 and I have the benefit of some life experience and being able to, approach any sort of hardship in my life with a little bit of a perspective. But, when you're 14 years old and you go through something traumatic like that, it can set you on a path where your life, it can debilitate your life. When I was around that age, my house was destroyed by a hurricane. And it almost
Oh,
caused
wow.
me to go off the wrong path. My parents, but I had good parents. And, so I was just curious. I'm guessing a large part of that was your faith in being able to carry on and lead such a productive and positive life in that. And I know some folks who have dealt with tragedy. A good friend of mine, they lost a child and they lost their daughter, and they are some of the most positive, people that I know. I'm just curious. This is a very long question, but it's a simple
Sure.
question. How you were able to, get through that.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. Yeah. Well, that's very, very emotional things. You're right. Like you were talking about the tornado or hurricane.
Yes.
I can't remember. When bad things happen, people do tend, you kind of have that fight or flight thing. You tend to either be like, you know what? I'm just not going to face it. I'm just going to act like everything's good no matter what it takes. You do have a lot of times those people. Sometimes you have the other side, which is I'm just going to become reckless because nothing matters in life, right? It's a little bit
Yes.
of, yeah, it's a little bit of nihilism. Nothing matters, so maybe just screw it all. Maybe I'll even hurt myself. You have a lot of people that enter into some form of self-harm, whether that is abusive drinking or alcohol or some sort of self-harm situation that's even darker in my view. All sorts of people handle this. And I, for people listening, if you don't want to hear about Jesus, I will make this as short as possible, but the question's asked.
Well, no. I just want to say, share about Jesus here. I want to hear those opinions because
Sure.
I don't want anyone.
I know you do.
Yeah, but no, people in the comments, they are my audience. I'm very fortunate. They're very positive people. And
Okay.
I don't tolerate crapping on people because they have different views, so please,
Right. Okay, cool. So go. All right. Good. That's good to know. Yeah, I think for me, it was that my mom had taught me a foundational life truth that is really, honestly, it changed my life as a young person.
Right.
And I was able to hold on to that during those rough times. I'm not saying I didn't have rough times. The hardest time wasn't even my mom's death. The hardest time was subsequently, 2 months after my mom died, my dad got remarried. And
Oh
me
my
and my
goodness.
dad began to hate each other in a pretty bad way. And there were times in my life, if you don't mind me being totally honest, during that era, that I sometimes would pray that God would make my dad try to physically abuse me. Hurting my own father, fantasy doing even worse to my own father. I'm not proud of it, but that is the truth of the anger that I felt. But I was able to hold on to this foundation that my mom taught me. I'm not proud of those things, by the way.
Of
I'm
course.
very much not.
Of course.
But I held on to this foundation that the reason that I am alive is actually not just for me to enjoy my life or me to have a good life or to get all the things that I want. The reason that I exist is in a bigger picture to bring glory to the one who created me. Wow. And if it, for some reason, is in his plan for me to lose my mom from cancer, or for me to have cancer, or for my life to be hard in any certain situation, if that can bring glory to the name of Jesus Christ, then that is really the best thing in the world. And that if I live for that, that there will be treasure for me in heaven. So it's not about living on earth. It is about living for eternity. And
Wow.
all things are created for the glory of the Maker. All things were made through him and for him and in him. So that is a foundational experience that I believe once you have that security in God to say, whatever you want for your glory is fine with me. And we even see that, my last thing I'll say about it, in Jesus, before Jesus died, if you remember in the Bible, if people have read it, he is praying to God the Father and he's saying, please let this cup pass from me. I don't want to suffer this kind of death, but it is not about my will. It's about your will. So there is that surrendering to God for his own glory. And that is what I had peace in. And I always held on to that. Sometimes I would pray, Lord, I want my dad to try to hurt me because he deserves to be hurt. And to be honest, he did deserve to be hurt. But God gave me an understanding that, you know, who else deserves to be hurt? That's me. A child that actually fantasizes about hurting their own parents, that is a really ugly thing that I need to be ashamed of. And God gave me an idea that I need forgiveness just as much as him. And through that, God gave me this perspective. And I'm able to share that in my songs. They might not always talk about Jesus, as you say.
Sure.
But I'm able to share that uplifting thing of we have to have hope. And
Yes.
we have to have life. We have to forgive people that do not deserve to be forgiven, and realizing that you don't deserve it either.
John, I feel like you're my therapist. That is amazing. That is incredible.
Well, that's great. Thank
I
you.
really appreciate that. That is very insightful and is very helpful, you know, to me personally as well. Guys, listen, we are so thankful of having John Cooper from Skillet here. And I just want to say that it's been an honor and a pleasure to have you on here today. You've got Victorious The Aftermath is out everywhere now. And again, I want you guys to go out and support this deluxe record. It is absolutely fantastic. The record itself, if you haven't listened, don't go into it with any preconceived notions. If you're not, if you have any preconceived notions about Skillet, these are banger rock tunes straight up. They're fantastic. I've listened to it on repeat for the last year or so. And so, you know, thank you so much, John, for coming on. I really appreciate it. And I would love to have you on anytime in the future. And if you guys, next time you come through here, I'd love to buy you a beer or take you out to eat or something.
Well, that's very kind. Thank you so much. And this has been a lot of fun. One of my favorites I've done. So thanks for everybody for listening. And I hope to do it again soon. We'll talk more about WWE and
Yes.
whatever else.
Thank you so much.
All right.